Good evening, mi gente. This is Jose Collazo, and you are watching live and direct from the palatial Found in Translation Studios. The Found in Translation post-debate night one special talk show. And I'm here with my intrepid producer and co-host, all the way, the true Mr. 305, Elbert Garcia. LB.
Hey, man. What's
Buenas
up,
noches,
Ray?
hermano. What's going
Hey,
on,
man.
brother?
I tell you, man, like it's crazy, right? We're at the end of July. Where did the year go? But it clearly has come and gone, and we're halfway through the year. And hopefully after the night in Detroit, one step closer to getting a Democratic nominee out of this process.
No question about it. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, I know people are chomping at the bit. They want to talk about really what I thought was, and we'll talk about this debate, but I thought was really kind of started as sort of one philosophical discussion about the direction of the party, but I think really led to the other, which I think was more timely. And of course, we had some special moments for some people that I was just waiting to shine, but we'll get into that. But again, I will remind people, this is the Found in Translation talk show in the process of being rebranded from Ray's Latino Talk podcast. We started as a podcast. We are now a radio program, which you can hear at WPPMLP 106.5 in Philadelphia, not only on 106.5 on the radio dial in Philadelphia and the surrounding area, but also on the TuneIn app. And you can catch the Found in Translation talk show and podcast anywhere you can download a podcast on the Ray's Latino Talk feed. We're in the process of redoing our imagery. Much respect to our identified a good friend to the show that's going to be design the logo for Found in Translations. We're very excited about that. And also you can watch this not only live streaming here on Facebook Live, but also the recorded version on our Ray's Podcast YouTube channel. This is Jose Collazo. As you can see, you can catch me on Twitter, continue the conversation on Ray's Podcast. Albert, remind people they can be involved in this conversation. They can not only chat us, their questions, their comments. They could be on video talking to LB and Ray Collazo, some of the top Latino political analysts in the country.
Yeah, when we are live. We're live broadcasting live on Facebook Live. Thanks to the folks at StreamYard. StreamYard is a new platform here, so we're testing out this software there. Much props to them for letting us do this, allowing us to also cash in and talk to our folks also live. Want to give a quick shout out to Leo Perales. Leo already chiming in at the bit, saying Bernie versus Warren was a letdown. So I'm sure you're going to be.
Well, Leo, our West Coast correspondent needs to jump on the air and show us that, he's got to bring that beefcake to the table, brother. So get your webcam going. Let's have this conversation, brother. Yeah, we need Leo on here, no question. And I encourage anyone watching, Albert, let people know it's very simple if they want to actually join us on video.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna drop the StreamYard link down below in Facebook for folks to do. As you can see, I'm kind of looking at my screen and looking at that. And I'll be letting folks do that. Drop in the screen there. We can see your comments as they're coming in. And then we're going to drop it very, very soon here. So, Leo, if you or anybody else wants to hop on, get your webcam ready. And as Ray said, so you can join us.
No question about it. And again, we encourage you to all. I'm just going to share it here on Facebook to let people know, join us now. And again, you not only can chat us on Facebook or on this platform here at StreamYard, your comments, your questions, they will appear on this. Some of them will appear on the screen as per Albert's direction and production. And also you can literally join us on here. Let's talk it, people. This was very exciting. So let's just get to it, LB. I want to get your initial reflections. Then we're going to get into our analysis of the candidates, some of the issues they spoke about, many of the issues they didn't speak about. Incredible. A bloodless revolution happened in Puerto Rico with 3 million American citizens. But what does that mean? But anyway, lots going on. Certainly a lot of white male privilege going on. White guys that don't do it too well in the polls all of a sudden get all kind of attention. But I will say this, that the biggest thing I take out of this debate is that it really was positioned in the strategy of these, especially these moderate, very minor, moderate commentators, candidates, was to pit themselves and attack the two leading candidates in the debate, who happen to be the two leading progressives in this debate, in this campaign, Senator Sanders, Senator Warren. What the evening evolved to was, beyond ideology and beyond that dynamic, really became morphed into a conversation about who really has the vision and the guts to aspire for real change in this community, in this country, and who is very frankly scared of white voters being scared off by Democrats going into next year. It's so interesting how, many of these moderates sort of, again, speak about Trump in very sort of normal political language, as if, I think even Ryan at one point said, well, he tried to do the right thing, or he had a good idea with the trade thing, and Delaney and a few others got into that kind of verbiage, went down that road, when at times Senator Sanders, at times Senator Warren, and even our homegirl, Marianne Williamson, who finally had her moment and got the biggest applause of the night, we'll talk about that later, spoke some truth. And the truth is, this is a fight for our democracy, and this is an existential fight for the future of the country. Do you want South Africa circa 1950s? Because as the direction we are going, if we continue to elect this man and continue to elect these people that obviously are conflicted, you want to say Moscow Mitch, you want to say, they are obviously co-opted in a way that the Republican leadership of the country that is very, very dangerous, particularly for people of color and poor people. LB, I am jacked up, my man. So why don't you jump in this conversation? What's your big picture take on what we just witnessed in Detroit?
Well, the first thing I want to know, at least from CNN, is, who it seems like the Republican talking points were fed straight into the producers, right? Because I felt like half the time that they were talking or asking questions, there was this question, there was these points and these almost like straw mans or false choices that people were having to make, right? Yeah. So I think it was interesting how they let themselves really really answer questions that seem to be almost like playing to that audience, right? And it may be just CNN's desire to try in their mind to try to play it down the middle, or try to at least get some sound bites that might attract at best the center right folks. But I just thought a lot of those questions was about that, and also just trying to kind of some people might say holding candidates accountable to each other, but a lot of kind of pitting folks versus each other. And trying to kind of feel those things there. So I feel like that was definitely the case in terms of that way. I also, found this discussion about fairy tale economics or fairy tale policies, right? That both was coming from at some points from various of the other, what we say, lower tier candidates, right? And I think that was definitely something that I was kind of surprised at, right? Because again, you would expect this, I would think, from another person across the aisle, not necessarily in a Democratic, in a Democratic thing. So I think that's definitely definitely like, at least on an overview picture there. I think you're right that this was a question about vision, who was going to fight. And I think that it's a really interesting question when you've got this mix of men and women. And women challenging other men as to say whether or not they're going to fight or not. And so I thought that was really interesting how the candidates kind of answered those questions in that way.
Let me read, and she actually retweeted it during the debates. Obviously, one of her social media staffers retweeted it. Senator Elizabeth Warren had the quote of the day after some mamby-pamby response by former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, Philly guy, by the way, but that's another story. Quote, I genuinely do not this is Senator Warren. I generally do not understand why anyone would go to all the trouble of running for president just to get up on this stage and talk about what's not possible.
Yeah.
And our homegirl, Maritza Perez, said that B-slap heard around the country. Okay, come on now. That sums it up. I think it was very interesting. LB, and we'll talk about the different candidates in a minute. But it was very interesting because last month, as you remember, I very much sort of opined around I was very sensitive to the minor candidates. Oh, they should deserve equal time. This isn't democratic. But I found myself, I must admit, during this, especially as the debate moved along, that I almost felt like the minor candidates, particularly Delaney and Bullock, were getting too much attention.
Yeah.
And I think that for whatever reason, the moderators and to your point, almost kind of looking for the more Republican looking face of this conversation, almost short shifted what I thought were generally strong performances by Mayor Buttigieg and our boy Congressman O'Rourke, and I almost felt like I wanted to hear more from them in relatively speaking.
Yeah, I was almost surprised. I mean, again, and I think this is what you have when you have different stations and different channels there. You've got different people I think they wanted to kind of lift those stories up, but they also knew that those folks were ready to challenge those folks and wanted to kind of flip it. And speaking of flipping, I wanted to let you know that Ray, we do have our friend Leo Perales is on.
Now we're talking. Let's get it going.
So I know that there was a lot of talk. People want to talk about Warren versus Bernie. I think we've got our friend Marlene Peralta, who's also asking the question, what about the Warren versus Bernie dynamic? So I know, Leo, you were talking about that. You had some opinions about that.
First of all, before Leo starts, and we're going to get to Miss Marlene's, and we got respect for Miss Marlene Peralta. She will be on tomorrow, so we're very excited about that conversation tomorrow. But in the meantime, first of all, Leo, introduce yourself. Let people know, because it's a little grainy. Make sure people know exactly what that hat says on there, so we're clear. And answer Marlene's question. What about the Warren-Bernie dynamic? I know you were paying particular attention to that in Eastern Washington State, the great Northwest, brother.
We can hear you.
Can you hear us, Leo? Leo.
Oh, Leo sound. Oh, make America.
Chingon again. I like that, brother. Leo, can you hear us, brother? Can you hear us? All right, so let's, just Leo, when you can
you guys hear me?
Jump in.
Leo, now we can. There you go.
Brother.
Okay, there we go. Perfect.
Go.
Can you guys hear me one more time?
We hear you, brother. We hear you. So talk to us about we saw your great hat, brother. So tell us about the Bernie Warren dynamic that Marlene Peralta from New York asked us to discuss.
I felt that there was going to be a little bit more punches drawn. From what I saw, try to team up and go after the other candidates, and they were kind of just choosing who they were going to go after. Because we all kind of feel that Warren is ascending, not only in the polls, but also in fundraising. So I think she really needed to solidify herself in her position. And you know, it seemed like at times they were helping each other, essentially making everyone else look not as progressive as them. I thought that was kind of a weird dynamic, and I'm wondering how that's going to be handled going forward, because I would have thought that they would have had to. I would have thought Warren would at this point want to separate herself from the pack. So yeah, I thought that was really weird, and I thought I felt that Warren had the best night out of anyone. I felt it was Warren, Biden, and then Buttigieg. Those are the top three, in my opinion.
Who was two? Biden wasn't there, brother. Who did you mean when you said Biden?
Oh, sorry. I said Bernie. I always Bernie, Biden. I always get them mixed up.
Let's talk about that for a second. So let me address Marlene's question specifically. Then let's talk about Bernie and the Warren dynamic. So I think you're right, Leo. It was interesting that basically it was clear from the bit players that their only shot was to take a blow. It was like watching a continuous 12th round of a boxing match, because it was like the guy down on the scorecards just has to, do whatever they can. So there was a lot of flurrying in the beginning, and there was a lot of obvious attacks on the front runners. I think you're right. I think essentially because they were being attacked as a pair, they sort of did team up. But I think Warren, although I think Warren was strong, particularly as the night went along, I really, I don't know who did the best, but I really think Bernie shined tonight. I think people saw the passion again. I think there was a lot of vim and vigor. I think he had a lot of great moments. I think he showed that he does have a vision and brought the conversation back to where it needs to be for him, which is who's really going to have the passion and the wherewithal and the staying power to get it done. I think there were still times where Warren, frankly, addressed the pushback to his ideas around healthcare and sort of his bigger picture ideas better than he did. But I thought Warren sort of did as I expected, and I think Bernie stepped it up. I think his team is telling him, you got to show more passion. You've got to not be laid back. And I think the fact that people jumped on him, I think he reacted to that well. LB, what did you think? Let's talk about Bernie for a second, specifically. Did you see Bernie making a comeback today? Because I felt Bernie sort of got back in the mix as a top.
Yeah, I think it was a tale. I think it was a tale of almost like two halves, right? I think the first couple of minutes he was kind of the same Bernie, same stuff that we've been kind of used to hearing. And then it got really, really excited. Like I think when he started to get excited, and then you had some of the other candidates saying, "Well, stop yelling," and him getting loud. it was almost like that kind of woke him up. Right. And I think in many ways for me, I thought it was a tale of two different kind of things. I think at the end of the day, he's, at the end of the day, the father of Medicare for all. And so any questions about that, he was going to say it. And I think, he pushed back on this idea that that we're taking, we're taking Medicare away. We're taking folks away. And again, to me, as someone who used to work, who worked on the passage of ACA, that was the biggest thing that that anyone who was against the ACA, anything that they said was that, healthcare was going to be taken away. Right. And again, I'm not quite sure how this Republican talking point got back on the scene. But it was something that I thought that he was able to kind of push back against. I do agree that that Warren, though, I think came out and I think she continuously impresses me in that she's able to kind of navigate and look like she's the adult in the room. Right. And I think, and I think for anyone's looking at anyone is looking at an alternative, to Bernie or someone that is, I don't want to say down the center, but someone who is maybe palatable to more audiences. I think she did. She continues to sell that
candidate. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that's kind of the thing. She's a more she's seen, and I tend to agree, frankly, that she's a more well-rounded version. I want to ask Leo this question. So, do you agree with my hypothesis, Leo, that the minor players wanted to make it a moderate or a more real vision versus the far left, but then it became it veered into a conversation about who's got the guts and who doesn't? Who do you think won in that dynamic of which dynamic do you think became the dominant? Do you think the moderates were successful in creating that dynamic, or do you think Bernie and Elizabeth and even Mayor Pete to some degree were able to make it more a conversation about who has the guts to do leadership, or just try to do minimal change?
I thought that the more progressive wing of the party won tonight. Like you were saying, Elizabeth Warren is the adult in the room. She did a very good job in articulating her policy stances. Now, Delaney and Bullock, the more moderate individuals, I was watching on Twitter. They were trending quite well. I would say on the Republican Twitter, I saw. I think they're saying Delaney. So there is individuals who like that more moderate candidate.
That sums it up, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah, pretty much. They look at maybe Delaney and Bullock as more electable, but they're just not. They're not enticing. They're not like a Warren or a Beto or a Sanders. They're not going to really invigorate the base. But I really do feel like that the left of center progressive wing of the party did really well tonight. And like you were saying, Bernie Sanders was at center stage, and he did extremely well tonight. I still, and from what I saw, I felt Warren did a little bit more better than he did, but he definitely came in second place. And then after that, Buttigieg. And I also thought Beto did a tremendous job, and he needed something. So he is going to be in the future debates, but he needed to have a better night tonight to really stay viable.
Yeah, to think that LB, I want to ask you a question from a sort of you and I really obsess about sort of how the media outlets handle this. We talked about it earlier, and particularly this became critical as it relates to the immigration conversation. Is that and Chris Todd, who nobody considers a right winger, really started it with sort of stoking this conversation in the last debate. Raise your hand if you think immigrants should get health care and it be decriminalized, and sort of these gotcha questions to steer the conversation further left in the Democratic immigration conversation on immigration. And so CNN sort of by continuing this conversation, which no one's ever really prioritized, frankly, this, would you either decriminalize or would you provide access to healthcare benefits for the undocumented? They continued on that theme. So sort of egging us on and sort of, almost like in this continual gotcha conversation framing, instead of focusing on the terrorism that we're inflicting on these people, focusing on a part of a potential comprehensive immigration package or revised healthcare law. So LB, what did you think about throughout the debate? How do you think CNN sort of couched these conversations? Do you think they sort of were trying to uplift a more moderate position. That's how it felt like to me. By keep going to Bullock and Delaney, frankly. But how do you think they sort of positioned some of the questioning?
Well, I think what they did was continue this narrative of, there's a group of folks who have or think that they have something, and then there's another group, an emerging majority or emerging demographic that now wants something, right? And everything from when immigration or even to the question about reparations, it seemed like they were pushing a narrative of a zero-sum game, right? Without actually talking about the actual issue, right?
Right.
Because again, when you're talking about when you're talking about providing health care to undocumented folks, regardless of what your position is on the matter, it's not like they have it now, right? Like no one talks about what's the actual effect of a parent who perhaps has a citizen child not being able to go to the hospital because they don't have health care, right? Or that more importantly, what they're doing now is paying tremendous amounts of money for that. How does that affect the rest of the community? What's the economic reasons? Like all those things get left off into this like zero-sum game of like, do you support or not? It was the same thing with like the question, the ridiculous question, I think, about healthcare. And like, do you support, do you think by Medicare for All, will you then raise taxes on the middle class? Not even so much even talking about what the hell happened to the lower class and the low income folks, right? As if like the middle class is the barometer of, yes, we know politically, but like from a realistic standpoint, here we are Democrats. How the hell you like, again, there's an overview. There's some of these things make sense. And I blame not so much CNN, because in some ways, that's what CNN does, right? CNN wants to do that. It wants to have, conflict to that, juiciness so you can watch cable. It's, like this is Ted Turner's network, right? I'm like, this is what he wanted. But I blame the candidates and the candidates party for allowing themselves to be, suckered in, bamboozled in to this kind of way, right? And it's like they don't have to do that, right? They don't have to answer the questions the way that they did and continue this narrative, because that narrative only aids, the larger Republican or GOP narrative.
I want to make a policy comment so people are clear on this dynamic around immigrants and healthcare access. And I'm going to tee you up, Leo. So I'm going to give you a minute to think about this question. So I want Leo to respond to that. And I want Leo to respond to the premise that, in my opinion, and again, I'm going to give you, Leo, a chance to respond. Think about it. Is that I felt very much like CNN couched this debate, and the moderate candidates jumped in, really focused on, like the 10% of the middle of the country. I mean, this really was kind of like for a swing vote, a relatively small amount of swing voters. You really think about and for the last 30, 40 minutes, when they really got into racial issues, is an exception. We'll talk about sort of that last tag at the end, which especially in our girl Marianne got the biggest applause of the night. We'll talk about that in a second. But generally speaking, they really focused their attention on not the Democratic base, and frankly, what makes up the Democratic Party. I mean, if you're a working class African American or even just kind of like a typical liberal, in a lot of parts of the country, they didn't really couch this debate in the terms of the people that are going to be voting in this primary for the most part. So the last thing I want to say, and Leo, so I want you to react to that statement if you feel who was really the audience for this. Because I don't think it was me, and I don't think it was Leo, and I don't think it was LB and many of our the people that make the core of this movement, right? Regardless of color. But the one thing I want to say, and just so people are clear, and nobody's gotten into this nuance because they don't have the time, but the reality is this: if you're in undocumented country, you have access to our healthcare system. It's the econo level, which is basically you have access to our emergency rooms, and you have access to healthcare centers around the country. And so it's limited. It's not ideal. It's not necessarily high quality, but we need to get over is the fact that really the conversation needs to be, how do we revise a healthcare system so that everyone, you could argue, pays, whatever they can afford or their fair share, whatever is reasonable. But the bottom line is that to say that we're giving away healthcare for free to immigrants, nobody's saying that. And nobody's saying the honest truth, which is we are creating, because of economic forces and because of the lack of political will to treat everybody with self-respect, that we're creating healthcare is another example in this country where immigrants and especially the undocumented population are treated like second and third class citizens. So let's just be straight with that. And we're going to talk about immigration. Let's talk about the terrorism that we're presenting on these people, because our law enforcement on the border is much more of a threat to the newly arrived immigrants than vice versa. Leo, talk to me about the tone, the vibe. What do you think about this moderate emphasis that came out of this discussion that was a big part of the discussion today, particularly given these very minor candidates a whole lot of play?
I think CNN needed to balance out the production value, or essentially the presentation of this debate. Now, when you have two juggernauts like Bernie, and then you can throw in Buttigieg in there, it kind of tips the scale on one side. So they give Delaney and Bullock and the more moderate candidates more time to speak tonight. But I do kind of felt that in a way, just the questioning, it felt like as if CNN was trying to control the debate and make it seem that Medicare for all, the public option in this healthcare debate, that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren out there in regards to this issue. And that Bullock and Delaney were more sane in their approach, more pragmatic. It did seem like for a while they were trying to get them to say certain things so that they can have that viral moment and catch these guys in saying something, and it just goes viral. So yeah, I guess you're right in a way. What were these questions, and who do they think that their intended audience was going to be, especially in a place like Detroit, who has bad water, and you have individuals who are not insured. You would think that they would it need to be more robust, because it just really felt like CNN was trying to control the debate and make it seem like perhaps just a public option, and that Medicare for all is just a crazy plan that Bernie and the Bernie and the Warrens want to put forward.
That's right.
That's how I felt.
So LB, I want to turn to you, and I want to share with people something that kind of speaking to priorities. And this is something we paid very close attention to in the first set of debates and now tonight, right? So I was just in Las Vegas last week talking to a group of Latino leaders. And we talked about a wide variety of issues. We actually released a poll in my day job with Unidos US around what are the issues Latinos care about. And it was very interesting because as I look at healthcare, obviously a very important issue, and immigration, which were the first two set of issues that got discussed tonight, gun violence, climate change, and a few other topics. The two issues that got the most, that developed the most conversation with a group of Latino leaders who, by the way, are the Latino electorate that have the most power in this primary process, because Nevada is an early caucus state, right? The two top issues that we talked about for over an hour were housing and education. Interesting how those issues, I don't know if they got discussed at all tonight. I don't believe they did. Maybe they did as I ran downstairs to get ready to do the show. But my point is that when it comes to issues that we care about and in the manner in which we care about, when we talk about immigration, why wasn't the conversation set up on, and I'm going to start calling this out more and more. Why aren't we need to demand to all these Democratic candidates to bilaterally say, we need to close these camps now. Why isn't that the main focus of the conversation around immigration, instead of this, this theoretical argument about how to change a system that we could sit here with the five reasonable Republicans in Congress that are left and figure out a plan that would be reasonable, that would be satisfy everybody? Why don't we focus on the fact that right now we are torturing children and caging young people for no reason? So this all to say, this disconnect between what is happening on the ground, and particularly impacting the Latino community. We just had in a U.S. territory of this country with over 3 million American citizens, over 8 million American citizens throughout the diaspora of this country, have a bloodless revolution related to corruption, related to homophobia, related to misogyny, related to the federal and the colonial government's response to a climate change disaster the likes of which we've never seen on our shores in this country. And I don't even think the compound word Puerto Rico was mentioned. So we're talking about a disconnect between what our community cares about and what I think a whole lot of Americans care about, and what the corporate media is spitting out. That's why, LB, we do this, because we got to keep it real about what's really happening in our communities.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Coño, I don't even know how to say it in English. I mean, da vergüenza.
Pero
Right?
explícate
Like,
español,
da
papá.
vergüenza. I mean, it's embarrassing, right? It's embarrassing. And the thing is that, again, I don't fault CNN.
For not to
right?
no, but you got to fault them.
But did you expect
Puerto
it?
Rico?
But did you expect it?
But ese es racista.
But did you expect it? I mean, let's be real.
You can't even couch. Hey, why don't we do that? I mean, it was shameful.
No,
to not mention Puerto Rico or housing.
It is shameful.
Education. What's the purpose of this? Oh.
Well,
talk to me, brother. Help me.
My point is that, like, look, at the end of the day, yeah, it's shameful because at the end of the day, look, some producer is looking and they're saying, okay, these are the 4 or 5 things. These are probably SEO keywords, probably, right? These are the things that everyone's talking about, everyone's doing, right? And again, I think what has to be realized and recognized by these candidates is that the demographic that CNN was targeting today, if that's a demographic that Democrats want to come out or expect to come out in 2020, then they have lost before they even have started the race.
Amen.
You know,
Amen.
Because
the Democratic political class in this country is so scared of white people. It's unbelievable. You don't disrupt the white apple cart, because you're absolutely right. If there's a white person out there that really believes at this point that Donald Trump is a better alternative than any of these major candidates, then we've lost them already. Preach, Elby. Talk.
Right. No, and the thing is, again, on the heels, right, of, I mean, there were, last week in Detroit, you had the People's Convention, right? You had a bunch of different other, like, in terms of social justice organizations gathering, moving on there in terms of Detroit. Flint got a little bit of some play, right? Yeah. Flint got a little bit of play, but not enough. Not enough play. Not enough play to talk. I mean, housing was talked a little bit in the umbrella around economics, but not enough play. I mean, it's Detroit. I mean, even if you wanted to keep things on the quote unquote positive and talk about what Detroit has become, that didn't even get there. And much like Miami wasn't in the house, this thing again was, you could have had it anywhere else. Right, you could have had it anywhere else in America.
Let me ask you a question, Albie. Let me ask you a question, Albie. If you had a third of the population of France that had, for whatever reason, migrated because of an extreme political situation throughout the United States, Canada, throughout this region, do you think that the conversation of TPS would have come up? Very ironic that just in the Senate, I believe today, the Senate shamefully did not vote because of Republicans. And of course, Marco Rubio, another freaking letdown, did not vote to pass temporary protected status for the millions of Venezolanos that are in flux all over the Americas, all over Colombia, all over, and many in the United States. Do not address that. Another humanitarian crisis is taking place in Latin America.
No, I mean, it's crazy. And again, and
the French would have got a mention. That's all.
The French would have got. I mean, look, I mean, and they just don't know, right? And I think this is when we're talking about, again, we're talking about the media, when we're talking about all the, when we're talking about what needs to really be in play for Democrats to win. And I think, that was why, Mary Wlliamson, like, was really poignant, right? Because the moments that she spoke, I mean, she hit it out the park, in my belief, especially towards the end, every time she was asked, right? Because part of it, again, is like, if you're an organizer on the ground, if you're, and I talk to organizers, I look at my Facebook feed of organizers, people who are doing the real work. People who are registering voters to vote, people who are educating people about how to get involved, educating people about how they can be a part of the process, trying to convince people to be back in the process. Those folks want a real conversation, right? And what, in some ways, what was given tonight, was almost like a Hollywood script, right? But we don't need Hollywood. Right? We don't need Hollywood in this country, right? What we need is because there's some real problems, some real issues. We need real people, and not just can talk about vision, right? But actually push a vision and learn how to actually stay on target and message when you've got somebody asking the wrong question, right? And if I'm going to say anything, I'm going to say, you know who's at fault here? The communicators and the press people and the talking point people who are supposed to prepare these folks, right? Because it's clear that those folks are not thinking about the Democratic Party and not thinking about in terms of the conversation that has to happen in this country. They're not thinking about that.
But they don't have the guts to say the truth. And that's why Marianne Williamson, we can talk about it, had one of the highlights of the night. I'm curious what Leo thought about when she had her moments to really talk about this underlying look, the election next year is about race. This has always been about race. The media didn't want to talk about it. The white political class didn't want to talk about it. The Democratic Party didn't want to talk about it. His victory in 2016, yeah, Hillary was a weak candidate. Russia, Comey, there was all some factors, of course. But the moment Donald Trump went down those escalators and made his campaign around his demonization of Mexicans and his polls went up, that's all you need to know. We knew from day one what this was about. Nobody wanted to listen to us. Now they're starting to come around to maybe this was about race. Evidence suggests it was about race. What else do you need to see? His campaign strategy is very clear. It's going to be all about race because he has nothing, as AOC has mentioned, he has nothing else to talk about. He has no issue. He has no policies to really help anyone except himself and his Mar-a-Lago buddy. So Marianne Williamson really sort of broke the dam to really talk about, you know what, this really is about what moderate approach, progressive approach. This is about we are having a fight for the soul of this country. And are we going to be a South Africa, a racialized caste society, or are we going to try to move forward together? And that's really what it's about. Leo, how do you think me and Obi got hype? The audience got hype. Probably the biggest applause of the night was Marianne Williamson going there and putting this the dynamics of this election next year in a racial context, which no one else seemed to have the initial chutzpah to do. Do you think it's going to click? It maybe works for us, but maybe not everybody, even other sectors of the Latino community. So what do you think, Leo? Do you think how did that moment strike you?
It struck me pretty good. I felt like she was going to have a moment in the beginning when she almost fell on the stage. And a couple of times in the beginning when they would ask her questions, she just seemed a little lost, but she definitely hit a home run on the answer to that question. I stood up, because like I said, right now, it just seems like whenever she starts talking, it's kind of like, okay, where's she going with this? And all of a sudden she found that groove and she just let it roar. And you could definitely sense a change in that audience. And like you said, people were standing up. Even my wife, who was doing her homework, she looked up, she even perked up, was like, who's that? Because it came off so well. And she articulated this next election. This president is so desperate right now. We just had that new Cruniac poll just come out this past week that 51% that this president is racist. So he's doubling down, tripling down on racism for this next election because he feels that newer people aren't going to vote for him. And I'm glad CNN asked that question. I feel like she did the best and she responded the best to that question tonight.
Yeah, no, and
too bad it's her last debate.
You never know. She may get a bump. I know seems like the political class is begging for Steve Bullock to get some shine. That was unbelievable to me. Incredible.
Yeah, I can't believe that.
Steve Bullock
for
got
all
a lot of play.
For all Bullock, you might as well give Wlliamson. Honestly, I thought she honestly was the clearest, she clearly communicated at least the values that I think a lot of Democrats have around this stuff, right? Now, is this the strict majority? Who the hell knows in terms of what the hell polling does, right? But I think a lot of people deep in their heart knows that. And
it brings out the passion. And going back to Bernie Sanders, he talked about that who's going to be the candidate that's going to bring out the passion of this party, which I think was a big part of the dynamic that only made Bernie, I think, look stronger today. Been a while. And also, this was Wlliamson talked about racism, the dark psychic force.
But that's the thing. That's
the underlying part of this election, which is what we've been talking about for 2 years here on the show.
And the thing is that I think she really was. It made sense, right? Like it just made sense. Like there was a lot of wonkish and there was a lot of talk, but like it just made sense, right? Again, when you look at these things, you wonder, like, who should have cabinet positions? Like, shoot, like imagine she was the press secretary. Man,
That's just me.
But I'm gonna say in terms of and I'm sure Marlene and some other folks might, but I'm just saying at the very least, at least it was a clearly communicated point, right?
Absolutely.
Like you didn't need a dictionary, you didn't need to follow like back and forth. She just kind of said, and I have to say, her summary of reparations, right? I mean, I think Kevin Powell said this also on Facebook too. I mean, I think it's probably one of the best summaries I heard. To make it clear in terms of the need or the case of reparations, right? And I think that they thought she was going to fall on her face on it, but she asked the question, she took it, she grabbed it, and she nailed it,
And on that point, Beto was the first one to say he would endorse a reparations bill. Leo, your thoughts on the two youngsters, Mayor Pete and Beto? I think we've talked about it early in the show, but I think, in my opinion, they both did well. But because of the dynamic of this push and pull between moderates versus progressives, vision for the future versus, let's just be adults and manage things, I almost feel like they got lost in the sauce a little bit. What do you think about Mayor Pete and Beto?
I thought Pete had a lot of time to talk. I think CNN, a lot of these networks really like Pete. I think people are starting to see
he's the latte candidate. There's no question about it. The coastal latte candidate,
right?
No question.
Maybe CNN feels like Beto has had his moment and he's not doing as good anymore. But I'm glad that he was in there and he had some good responses to some of the questions. I'm glad he came out in favor of reparations. CNN didn't set that up because Beto's camp said that they were going to grab Mayor Pete, and that just didn't happen tonight. I guess the questioning, and they didn't get them to kind of tangle a little bit for that viral moment, if you will. But because they're definitely both going for that generational vote, and also because they represent the future of the party. But I thought Pete did a little bit better than Beto. I think Beto. It would have been better if Beto would have been on the stage with Wlliam, because Wlliam, he got him good on the immigration question. Yeah. Hopefully they're on the stage again, and because I would like to see Beto in there. I think he does well. He'd be a good representation of the party. I would like to see him answer more questions and get a little more time on that stage.
Yeah, Beto, I thought we could talk about him for a second. I think Mayor Pete, Mayor Pete's pretty steady. I mean, I think he did well. I think the fact that and I think to some degree, Beto also would have benefited from being on the stage with Biden as opposed to the main players being Bernie and Warren, because they're able to draw more of a contrast, particularly generationally and also like stylistically. But I think Mayor Pete, Mayor Pete's like steady. I think he's gonna, I don't think he's gonna acquire a lot of new voters, but I don't think he's gonna about it either. I think Beto's kind of back in the mix. I think he's back to respectability is kind of the best way to put it to my degree. So I think it was a good night for Beto, even though, again, I think he'd be better playing off a Biden than a Warren, frankly. And the Pete Beto thing, which probably would help Beto at some point, didn't materialize. But I think he lives to fight another day. The problem with Beto is, and I think he's going to come out of this, people still like Beto. He's got a place, but is he really does he have a compelling argument to win? And I think sort of big picture, from my perspective, I think Sanders and Warren, whether you like them or not, had a compelling argument to why they should be the nominee, not just be an up and coming guy or someone that we like, even like a Wlliam, but who should be the person that wins this. So I think that in that sense, I think they held serve. LB, any thoughts quickly about O'Rourke or Mayor Pete?
I think I think they I think it was important for them not to have any embarrassing steps, right? Things that people could kind of troll them around and stuff like that. So in that way, I think that they were kind of successful there. And so they Pete, Mayor Pete's been consistent, and that is. That's what he needs, right? He needs a consistency, because I think as these other candidates, these kind of lower tier or third tier candidates fall by the wayside, I think he picks up a lot of those folks. And so I think he needs to just make sure, like just in terms of his path to victory or his path to Iowa, he just needs to get to the third or fourth debate. And and the consistency of his message will I think allow him to shine. So I think that was great. I think the same thing with Beto. I think Beto didn't embarrass himself, and so that means that he gets to live to fight another day.
Yeah, no, I thought Beto did a good job, but again, what's the compelling message? Like, he did a good job, but I can't say outside the reparations thing that I remember much of what he said. I just think he kind of just did well. Really quickly, because I know we want to wrap this up right at the end of the hour. And again, you're watching the Fountain Translations talk show post-debate. You know, you don't need to watch CNN or MSNBC and say, well, I don't see people that reflect really how I'm feeling about this. You just come here to Fountain Translation. We take care of it for you 24/7. Quickly, you know, we had a very accomplished U.S. Senator on the stage we haven't even talked about. LB, Senator Klobuchar. I mean, I still feel like, she did a better job communicating, I think, today. And I think of all of the more moderate candidates, I think she had some of the stronger arguments. But I just don't think she's connecting and really exciting anyone. I mean, and she's a very accomplished woman, could be a good VP, but she's just not drawing attention to herself. And I'm wondering why. Is it just, you know, so I don't know.
I don't know.
I think she did better than the last time.
I think I would agree. I think, you know, it's interesting because if you look through, I think if you look at her social media, I think if you look at her following, I think if you look at like the articles that have been written about her and also in terms of the people that are reacting, she certainly seems to be someone that connects better in person, right?
Yeah.
I think that's definitely something that's when you're looking at the coverage of her, I think that makes well. And she's an accomplished senator from Minnesota, right? I mean, like, anyway, she talks about, you know, and a lot of her stuff, like, you know, her mentor being Paul Wellstone and kind of the progressiveness of Minnesota in some ways there. So I think in some ways you've got a case of a country who wants things more urgently, perhaps more urgently than she's used to pulling through when it comes to like politically, right? A lot of times elected officials don't want to get ahead, you know, of the wave, right? And so I think that there's a step, you know, there seems to be a step like that for her.
Senator Klobuchar, I think it's almost like thinking about like the NCAA tournament, March Madness. She just needs to survive in advance, because you said it very distinctly, I'll be that Senator Booker, you felt will start doing better when the group gets smaller. I think because she's not a flamethrower, she's not a pizzazz type person. I think if she could just somehow stick around to that last 6, 7, I think she gets more time. She'll show her substance. Again, she's an accomplished woman. She'd make a fine president. Yeah. And I don't want to dismiss her because she doesn't have that zest. But as Leo said on the chat, personality matters. You know what I'm saying? Any of the other minor candidates, Leo, that stuck out to you, moments against some of these other players, which I'm amazed how much some of them PT they got out of this whole conversation. Any of the minor players we haven't talked much about that you have any reflections on?
No, that's. I think I speak for everyone. A lot of the other candidates fell flat. I think Klobuchar falls flat. She doesn't excite anybody. She's well accomplished, but like the others, personality matters. It's not really about policy. Sometimes some of those questions, when they get deep in the weeds, people will just change the channel for a sec, and then when they turn it back, you hear Bernie yelling at people. You know, it's like Bernie who are going to win this nomination and advance, not the people who are trying to be the adult in the room and talk about policy and substance. Sometimes, it's just the way it is.
It's a shame. Tim Ryan, really quickly, I thought it was interesting when he talked about having a chief manufacturer, like another cabinet position, so that we could build electric vehicles and solar panels. It's interesting how, like, people in Tucson, Arizona are not part of his vision. It's so interesting how he just focuses on, you know, he wants to be the ambassador of the Midwest. He's not really running for president because all he talks about is what would service a very small slice of the country. So anyway, again, that bridge is not there, which makes up the base of the party. You know, Delaney, I just can't believe how much attention he got. I don't think he's going to go anywhere with this, but
he's in Pennsylvania, right? Isn't Delaney a Pennsylvania?
Delaney's from Maryland, brother.
Maryland, that's right.
You're a geography player. He's a Maryland guy, but you know, the bottom line is,
he seemed like,
you know, it'll be interesting to see what reaction people get, because he got a whole lot of play. But his camp is, I mean, his campaign's fledgling. You know, the guy that really, I think of all these people, needs to just go away is Hickenlooper. Man, he just has no place in it. Just got burned by Elizabeth Warren. He needs to go home now. Now he's the one that needs to stop his campaign immediately. And You know, again, Bullock, the height of white privilege. I start late. I don't make the first poll. I get in only because of like a loophole and the fact that Swalwell stepped out. My man Gravel could have got in that spot. I mean, he went out of like a couple tiebreakers to get the last spot.
Seemed like The Voice. It didn't like he got in like it was like one of those things like The Voice.
No, and the thing is, he's got a voice for beer commercials. Oh my God, what a great voice that guy's got. But that's, I mean, you talk about, and then they treated him like a main cat. I couldn't believe how much respect and deference they gave him. It's almost like they know on some level Biden's going to keep sinking, which I think he's going to do. And they're looking for another white, moderate, middle-aged man alternative. And I think they said, well, let's give Bullock a shot. Hickenlooper got no shine. Let's see how your boy does tomorrow, Leo. And why don't we transition into that? Can your man Governor Inslee make some noise tomorrow? Because I would rather see him get more play. At least he's got some support. At least he's got a little more of a track record. And he's got the support of Leo Perales. So, Leo, what are you looking at for tomorrow's debate with a much sexier cast of characters?
Well, my governor is running on climate change. He was tweeting during the debate. 1 hour goes by, not a question about climate change and about saving this earth. I'll just tell you, I'll give you guys some breaking news. I'm hearing through multiple sources that Mr. Inslee's campaign will probably be done after this debate.
Wow.
So,
wow.
He's hovering at under 1%. Yeah, I mean, I could see it probably as early as Friday that he's probably done, and he'll just come back.
This is the kind of insights that you get here on the Found Translation Show. LB, and you heard it here first. You're going to hear all the pundits talk about this tomorrow, including my homeboy, my friend. I know a dear brother to me and Elbert, the man that should be our governor of Florida, Andrew Gillum. I predict a good brother right there is going to say on tomorrow the aesthetic, the visual of Joe Biden, old man Joe, that once paved the way to stop busing in this country in the 70s, is going to be flanked by not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 candidates of color who will be standing flanking him, right next to him tomorrow night. The optics of that moment will be something that our dear brother, I'm predicting it now, our dear brother Andrew Gillum will note on CNN tomorrow night. LB, the dynamics, Kamala gets another shot at him. Booker gets a chance to stand with the big dog. Can Biden stand up to the pressure? Because they're going to put it on tomorrow, my friend.
I mean, this is like
in Detroit, Detroit, brother.
If you're talking about, again, like, we're all sports aficionados. If you're talking about this is the NCAA, this is definitely like, this is just before the Sweet 16. This is a round of 32. This is if Biden has another performance like he did the other time, then he still stays in because there's enough people who are really looking at it. I mean, but in terms of the spirit, he needs to pick up some spirit, and I don't see him doing it if he can't, actually respond in a way that doesn't seem like a defensive white man, right? Like, that's what he needs to do, right? Like, people want leadership, right? People want someone to say, like, even if they have to swallow the pill of Joe Biden to end Donald Trump, people want to actually know that he's actually going to be able to do something, right? It's one thing to have a vanilla candidate, right? Who does their homework and gets straight A's, right? But at least with that kind of student that he's going to get straight A's, right? Right? That's the thing, right? The thing with Joe is that no one knows whether or not this brother can still run the race, right? And this Rose Garden strategy is something that's scary, right? And we don't need that. We don't need it in 2020.
I know people. I talk to people, man. It's a real.
We don't need that. We had that in 2016. We had the influencers.
Too casual, dog. No showing me you want it. You talk about the NCAA tournament. You got to show me you want it. Bernie Sanders showed me tonight he wanted it. I don't know if he's the best candidate. I don't know if he's going to win. But tonight, my man showed me he wanted it. Who's going to show me tomorrow he really wants it? I had a very good,
she wants
she wants it. Thank you for the correction, brother. And I've got some intel that I feel like Wlliamson's going to show us he's going to want it tomorrow. I think Booker's going to show us he wants it tomorrow. And a few others. We'll see. But it's going to be very fascinating. I think Wlliamson will be the one. but I call on all the candidates. If they don't bring up Puerto Rico, if they don't bring up and prioritize the manner in which they have to discuss what's going on our southern border, and one of these candidates needs to call on all of them to call on these camps to end, especially the ones that are for profit, to close. Let's show some real leadership tomorrow night. Let's talk about Puerto Rico in a very way. Let's talk about TPS. Let's talk about a Marshall Plan for Central America. And let's talk about this for real. And why don't one of these candidates just say it? Say, look, half of America's been conned. The whole point was to support the working people and all your grievances, and all he's doing is stoking more racial sentiment. He's hurting people because it makes you think you feel good. And by the way, the tax bill, he's trying to take your health care away, the Texas versus ACAR case, you're getting screwed. So get off this nonsense about arguing about policy points about people you don't even understand the circumstances they came for. You're being screwed. And by the way, I'm so sorry we didn't get to this earlier. This episode of Found in Translation is dedicated to three young people of color.
Oh, hell yeah.
Who were killed in a vicious hate crime in one of the seminal Latino communities in this country, Gilroy, California.
Yes,
Steven Romero, who has a striking resemblance to my youngest son and Albert's godson, Max. And you know that, LB. I know that hit your heart. Like, damn, that look like Max. Kayla Salazar, Trevor Irby. Let's fight for them. And let's show the American public that you're willing to fight for them the way that those children deserve to be fought for. And look, this ain't just, look what's happening in the Midwest and the trade issues. Yes, obviously, we need to take care of that. And we need to make sure everybody's get health care. No importa if you're a rural white person, West Virginia or pork. Yes. But it ain't going to be through hate, my man, and division and a con artist that y'all are following like sheep. And the rest of the Republican Party, especially that shameful Senate leader Mitch McConnell, who's selling our country out to the Russians, definitely needs to. We need to show some leadership tomorrow. You know, I have a confession to make as we wrap this up. We're really happy, appreciate everybody's care in this conversation. Leo, I have a confession to make to you, my friend. Leo, can you put Leo on the screen? I need to talk to him. Leo, I don't want to hurt your feelings. You know how much I care about your brother. You know, you're my man. I mean, you're like my home dog. But I got to tell you something. Only because of the care I take for our audience, I have to say I don't want to say cheating, because that's kind of a titillating statement. But I must say at this moment, you're not my only Northwest Mountain Region correspondent. And I because I have a responsibility to the show, my man. So I just want to let you know that only because of the responsibility I have, Steve Bullock came into the race. So because I got to show people, even on Puerto Rican, I got my tentacles are everywhere. I had to begin a relationship with my Montana correspondent. Her name, and all jokes aside, there's nothing freaky going on. It's just business. Great progressive activist who I do environmental work with, Molly Moody. Yes, her name is Molly Moody, who is the Found in Translation Montana correspondent. Just returned my text around how she thought her main man, who she spent a half hour trying to convince me of his viability recently, Steve Bullock, did. Let me read Molly Moody's note.
You should have dropped it into Facebook.
She should have jumped on the show. We love Molly. Molly's good people. I like Molly a lot. Bullock definitely held his own. He came across himself and kind of down home. And oops, the slip at the end, proliferation. I guess he had a slip of the tongue on the core issues Bernie wanted for me. Oh, there you go. There you go, Leo. So, Leo, I know that like Montana's like a rival state for you guys up there. You have your little rivalries, your little Division II college football stuff. I understand that. But I just had to share publicly, you know, we have to be transparent here on the show. I got to go the extra mile. If there was a candidate, and we need a Hawaii correspondent for Tulsi, LB.
Maybe we should go to Hawaii. Maybe.
But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Leo, you and I may have to go to counsel. I'm willing to do counseling. Maybe we could speak to a religious leader to maybe work this out. But I just want to let you know, brother, ain't personal, just business. I hope you can forgive me. I know you do. I know you're down with my
I'm glad you
Montana
got more
people.
people joining the pool.
Leo, let's wrap this up. Let people know where they can find you. Got the You're a podcaster. You're an activist. Let people know where they can find you. You're not just a Run DMC impersonator, you can see from your gear today. So let people know where they can find you on social media. Continue this conversation with you, my man.
You can find me at the Perales Report, right on Facebook. You can just search it right there. I come right up, and just follow me in general. You can find me on Twitter. I was tweeting throughout the debate, giving you my insights and insults. So there you go.
There you go. And Leo, for those that don't know, has run for office in Washington State, ran a very competitive state Senate race recently. So we're going to continue to follow your activism, your journalism, and your political career, Leo. I want to see you back on the ballot soon. Albert, let people know where they continue these conversations with you. You're based down in Florida, and you're going to be having I don't know if you want to announce it, but you're going to be having your own podcast platform very soon, which I think will be very interesting to a particular segment of our community for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I'll wait till next week's show to try to unveil a little bit more in terms of what we're doing, but we're definitely trying to get more and more folks like this. I think, look, at the end of the day, this country's changing, and this media is a half a step at the very least behind. And so we're trying to create more platforms like this. You can find my work at the folks at Law at the Margins. That's where I do some interactive production work, which I'm Totally Huck and her crew of activists, movement lawyers. You can also reach me you can find me on Twitter at Albert Garcia FL. That's at Albert Garcia FL. And again, we're trying to, you can find all the things that we're doing at Found in Translation. You can still go to, raisepodcast.com. You could also go to foundintranslation.co and tune in and download all the podcast and video episodes of the shows. And if anything, subscribe to our YouTube channel and also, like us on Facebook. We're all there. We're all on social media. Follow us all there.
So we got some big news we got to share, and we should have teed this up early in the show. So we're going to be back tomorrow night. Tomorrow night we got a great lineup for you. We had some technical glitches, and we were going to have some other guests, but Leo pitched in. Our pinch hitter here from the Northwest. Edgar Martinez. He's our DH. He's our designated hitter
definitely.
from the Northwest. Brings a lot of power to these conversations. But tomorrow night you got to tune in because not only it's going to be a big night, Joe Biden and Booker and Wlliamson and everybody, but we're going to have Marlene Peralta, New York journalist, activist, and marketing journalist, PR specialist. Marlene Peralta, the Dominican princesa. She's going to bring a lot of flavor to this conversation. We're so excited to have Marlene on the show. Albert, let people know about our special guest from Washington. Una Boricua is going to be joining us. She's going to be bringing a lot to the table tomorrow as well.
Patricia Guadalupe is one of the premier journalists that we have in our community. Long-standing, legendary, I would say. Legendary, right?
No doubt. No doubt.
In terms of based out of Washington, D.C. She's going to be joining us tomorrow. And so, and the thing is, both with Marlene and with Patricia, man, they don't pull no punches, man. They don't pull no punches. They tell you like it is, whether you like it or not.
You're right about that, dog. And of course, we got to round it out with my homeboy in Pennsylvania, Abe Ambrose, a dear friend and one of the top Latino Democratic strategists in the country. Leo, this is a man that was once the communications chair for the DNC in Pennsylvania under the dean tenure at DNC, as well as former Governor Ed Rendell's press secretary. And so this is a man that brings a lot to the table as well. And so he's going to definitely, from a Democratic strategist perspective, bring a great perspective to this. Gentlemen, caballeros, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, we just want to make sure we bring more people into these conversations. Leo, thank you again for being our DH tonight. Our Edgar Martinez from the Northwest, of course. Much love to our friends and family out there. And the other thing I wanted to tee up is that look out for announcements on social media. You may have if you're in San Diego, I may have a special show this weekend to share with you. Yes, I will be in San Diego this weekend. So if you like what you hear and you're going to be in that part of the if you're going to be in that part of the country, holla at your boy. So check out for social media for the announcements on the exact location and details. Thank you, Molly Moody, for chiming in. Thank you for everyone else that joined in on Found in Translation talk show tonight. Keep watching tomorrow and have a great day.